Good morning, everybody, and welcome back here to the humbly and originally named Pat Flynn Show. It is always a joy to be with you. Today, we're going to discuss a new creation. Yes, I have another new creation for you. You know, on Mondays, we like to focus on some practical things that you can implement. I like the idea of giving you something on the podcast that you could take and use immediately today if you wanted to. So cheers, everybody. Welcome. We are live streaming, of course. If we have some time at the end, we'll take some questions. So say hello in the comments. Let me know what you're drinking and what, if anything, I can answer for you. The theme of today's episode, or discussion, I should say, will be fitness minimalism. How to get more results with less equipment. And we have a question that was sent in from a gentle listener who answers to the name of Justin. And he wanted to know how I would put together a program using just 3 pieces of equipment: kettlebells, ab wheel, and gymnastic rings. So what I want to talk about is why I actually think that this is like an awesome setup. If you're into the idea of being a minimalist with fitness, why I think that this trio combination of kettlebell, ab wheel, and gymnastic rings makes a whole heck of a lot of sense. And then I want to talk about and share with you just a little outline of a program that I have put together free of charge, and you can take it and you can use it and you can get awesome results. So stay tuned, because that's what we are going to dive into. In the meantime, please do me a favor. Please like this video, whether you're on YouTube or Facebook. Please share it. Please subscribe. Please say hello in the comments, and we will move forward. Raju says, "Hey, Pat." Well, hello to you. Thanks for tuning in this very fine Monday morning, good sir. Okay, so fitness minimalism. Let's do a brief review. To me, being a minimalist, it doesn't mean just doing very little for the sake of doing very little. Minimalism to me is it's more specific than that. The idea of being a minimalist is to try and find that cross section between effectiveness and efficiency. Now, effectiveness is doing the right things, right? You have a goal. What are the things that you should be doing that are going to really make a difference for achieving that goal? That's effectiveness, doing the right things. So that's one aspect of minimalism. Another aspect is efficiency, and that's not just doing the right things, but doing things right. So very quickly, to give an example, you can be effective at something but inefficient. So what would that be? Say you want to gain strength, you want to gain upper body strength. Okay, what would be something effective for that? Well, upper body resistance training, for example. Traditional weightlifting, say military pressing. That's an effective choice. However, you can be inefficient in as much as you don't have good technique, or you program your variables poorly. You don't really pay attention to intensity, density, duration, volume, frequency. So you could be doing the right things, but you can be doing them poorly. So you can have effectiveness without efficiency. The reverse is also true. You can be efficient at something, but it could be very ineffective for your goal. So say you want to gain upper body strength. Well, you might be great at running, and you might be really efficient at running, and you might have a very efficient running program. But running, long form, moderate intensity cardio efforts, awesome exercise, but just not effective for building upper body grinding strength. You see what I'm saying? So you could be really efficient. You could have something very, very efficient, just very fine tuned and precise, but it's just not effective. So it's not going to be very useful for your goals. So when I define minimalism as the idea of trying to find that ideal intersection between effectiveness and efficiency, I hope it sounds so utterly obvious that it's almost trivial. Like, in what sense would you ever not want to be a minimalist? In what sense would you ever not want to be anything less than as effective and efficient as you could be? So minimalism to me is not necessarily about doing very little for the sake of doing very little, but it is about putting yourself through a frequent mental exercise of asking, what is the least amount I can do to reach my goal? And that mental exercise is about trying to get you to focus on what is going to be most effective for your goal and how do I efficiently reach it. And depending on what your goal is, you can take a minimalist approach that might still require a whole heck of a lot of work, if you see what I'm saying. But hopefully it's not any more work than you need to do. So the minimalist is somebody who really tries to take the time to understand what ingredients are essential, what ingredients are of high priority, what sort of ordering those ingredients should take, and what things can be left out of an exercise program. I often say that a good exercise program improves in direct ratio to the number of things you can leave out of it. They should not be there. They should not be there. Okay, so that's a general philosophy we're working with. Now let's get a little bit more specific. I see some of you already asking questions. We'll do questions at the end, so drop them in the comments and say hello. We will save some time for Q&A at the end. But I want to keep storming ahead with this fitness minimalist approach. Okay. It should also be said that I'm a generalist and I promote fitness generalism. So I'm not worried about hyper specialization, being the best in the world at any one thing. I talk to people who want to be kind of broadly fit across a wide range of categories. People who care about strength, who care about lean muscle, who care about conditioning, aerobic, anaerobic capacity, mobility, flexibility, and who care about the complementarity of fitness and health. Who don't ever want to put fitness and health at odds, right? Because you can do that. If you become a hyper specialist and you want to be like the best in the world at something, very often to become more fit, which is your ability to complete a task, will compromise your health. And this is obviously true, right? With hyper specialists and pro athletes, right? They frequently compromise their health, do unhealthy things to accomplish a fitness task. So fitness and health are not the same thing, and they can be at odds. But what I teach and what I promote is generalism, which is we're not going to worry about being the best in the world. We want to be good to great, or at least fairly competent at a lot of things. And we want to use fitness to improve health, right? Or at the very least, never degrade it, but hopefully always improve it. So we want this complementarity. These are my core philosophies, right? So if that resonates with you, you're in the right spot. If you want to be a minimalist and you want to be a generalist, the Pat Flynn show, everything I have to say, that's going to speak to you. If you want to be like a professional bodybuilder, powerlifter, Olympian, this may or may not be for you. May or may not. Okay, so with that in mind, I want to talk about a minimalist fitness setup for somebody who's interested in being a generalist, right? You want to be generally physically prepared. Well, this will go to Justin's question. And he said he's got 3 things available, right? He's got a kettlebell, he's got rings, and he has an ab wheel. Now, I want to talk about why I think these 3 things are actually awesome. Like if you were to ask me, Pat, what are the 3 things I should have? Or like, what's the least amount I should have if I want to have enough on hand to be effective and efficient in building general physical preparedness? I would probably say something exactly like this. You want a kettlebell, you want a set of rings, and an ab wheel. Now, why these 3 things? Well, one, the kettlebell is, to my mind, like the Swiss Army knife of functional fitness. So the kettlebell is one of those tools that can do a lot of things really well, even if it isn't the best in the world at any one particular thing. So the kettlebell is great at building lower body power. It's great at building upper body strength. You can use it for mobility and flexibility with get-ups and windmills. It's phenomenal for metabolic conditioning and complexes, the types of workouts you see on my YouTube channel. So it is an extremely versatile, compact, and all things considered, relatively inexpensive piece of fitness equipment where even with just one kettlebell, you can get a ton of work done. If you have a set, then you're probably going to be set for pretty much life, right? So that's why I would say the kettlebell should definitely be in there, especially if you like training at home and you don't want to take up too much space. Secondly, the rings, however, also have enormous utility, and they help fill certain gaps in kettlebell training. Now, what's a gap in kettlebell training? Well, here's a gap. Vertical pulling. Right? We don't get a lot of vertical pulling with kettlebell training, right? We can do horizontal pulling with rows, but we don't get a lot of vertical pulling. Well, here's where rings are really great. They can help fill in gaps with different pushing and pulling angles. And rings are awesome because they can serve pretty much all the functions of a suspension trainer, like a TRX, which I think is a fine piece of equipment, but they're far less expensive. And I think they're more versatile. So you can get a set of gymnastic rings relatively inexpensively. I think for around like $30. Just get the wooden rings. You don't need anything fancy with the sort of locking systems straight from Amazon. I'll have some links that I can put in the show notes of the ones that I think that will serve you just fine, right? Okay. So rings are great. What's the killer app of rings? Dan John likes to talk about killer apps. Like, what is this thing like really best at? If you're going to use it if you're going to try and be really effective with this thing, Or if this thing is effective for anything, what is it really effective at? Rings, to my mind, are phenomenal for the upper body stuff. Dips and chin-ups especially, right, are going to be a hallmark of ring work. Dips, chin-ups, but of course you can do rows and push-ups and stuff like that too. So they really help and are really useful for the upper body strength and muscle building stuff. Okay, cheap, inexpensive. You can keep them in a backpack, easy to transport, that sort of thing. I hope this makes sense. By the way, for those of you who are tuning in live, does this sound okay? Give me an acknowledgement in the comments. I'm testing out my position with this microphone and how much distance I can keep behind it. So let me know if you don't mind. Just like give me a thumbs up or a yes, it sounds fine, or I sound too close or too far away, and I will adjust. So would appreciate some feedback there. I'm trying to not have it like blocking my entire face. Not that you guys care tremendously about seeing that anyways, but you know what I'm saying. Okay. Now, okay, so kettlebells really versatile. Rings, moderately versatile, but they fill gaps in kettlebell training, important gaps, and they're not that expensive. The ab wheel is interesting because the ab wheel is sort of like a single function piece of equipment where it does like one thing and that's it. And what does the ab wheel do? Well, it does ab wheel. Ab wheel does ab wheel, and that's it. And that's okay, right? And that's okay because it does that one thing so well, like the direct core work, the direct anterior chain work. The ab wheel is such a high bang for your buck, direct core exercise in terms of neuromuscular facilitation, that it's worth having that one piece of equipment to do just that one thing, right? Like if you could do like full standing ab wheel rollouts, this is what Dr. Jim talked about on the last podcast, like your core is probably as strong as it will ever need to be, right? And it's okay to have one thing that just does one thing really well, especially when that one thing is only like $10 and it's only this big. And that's pretty much what an ab wheel is. If you go on Amazon, again, I'll put some links down below in a minute. But don't get anything crazy fancy or convoluted. Just like get the $10 ab wheel. That's all you need. And then you'll be set to go. So that will fill in a gap and give you some additional direct core work. Now, why is that important? Direct core work. Yes, you're getting core work with the kettlebell stuff. You're getting core work with the overhead presses, the rack positions, but having some extra direct core work just sort of knits everything together. One, it can, help you build out the abs more aesthetically, which I know is always of interest to people because let's be honest, it is. However, the more direct core work I find tends to have an important sort of spillover effect. It makes you stronger, more stable everywhere else. So I think pretty much any program will benefit from having at least some specific direct core work added into it. Not just doing like the big basic fundamental push, pull, hinge, squat, carry, but having some specific direct core work in there. And my go-tos are hanging leg raises and ab wheel. Now the hanging leg raise we can do with the rings. So that's another function of the rings. And then the ab wheel we do with the ab wheel because ab wheel does ab wheel. By the way, thanks everyone for letting me know that my sound is okay. Alan says the voice is perfect. Perfect, really. That's awesome. Okay, so I'll keep the microphone about here then. Cheers, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. As always, I really enjoy these live streams. Adds an interesting new dynamic to the podcast. So introduce yourself. Don't just be a lurker. Don't just be a creeper. Say hello. Let me know if you have a question or a topic of interest, and we'll jam around here at the end. Okay, so that's my case for like the fitness minimalist setup. How to get more results with less equipment. Kettlebell, rings, ab wheel. Done. Let's take a look at how you might put some of this together. Does that sound good? You guys want to do that? All right. I have a document. I'm going to share on my screen. And if you're just listening to the podcast, because I know not everybody is watching, just pay attention. I will explain everything to you, and then I will link the document in the show notes over at chroniclesofstrength.com so you can take a full look at it later. But in the meantime, let's pull this document up. And here we can see that this is called the Fitness Minimalist, Kettlebell, Ab Wheel, and Gymnastic Rings. So let's talk through this. And I want to give you something that you could literally put to use as soon as we're done with this conversation here. This would be a 3-day-a-week training program. I think that that's a fine split, very reasonable. These sessions will take definitely less than an hour, probably only about 30 minutes. So time constraints shouldn't be a major issue for following something like this. Equipment shouldn't be a major issue for following something like this. I have links in this document that I'll share in the comments. By the way, let me give a shout out. If you need a kettlebell, check out invertedgear.com. And let me give them a deserved plug right now. because they have sent me a kettlebell and it's awesome. And it's got a cute little panda on it. So if you're kind of like not trying to be Mr. Macho with the kettlebell in the shape of the skull and you want to do something quirky instead and have a kettlebell with a panda on it, these kettlebells are awesome. Plus, they're hooking us up with a discount. So they are now an official sponsor of the show. And if you want to help the Pat Flynn Show keep the lights on, you get a 15% discount on anything over at Inverted Gear if you use the link I just put in the show notes, which is invertedgear.com/discount/PatFlynn15. Invertedgear.com/discount/PatFlynn15. Helps us keep the lights on. I should say light. There's only one light in the Pat Flynn Show, but we want to keep it on. So if you need a kettlebell, and I know there's been kettlebell shortages this past year, check them out. They're just awesome, good kettlebells. Definitely recommend. The other things you're going to need are a set of gymnastic rings, an ab wheel. We'll have links to those in the documents if you need them anyways. I found ones that I thought were very inexpensive, but definitely good and usable. Okay, so that's what you need. And you need the planet Earth. As long as you got the planet Earth or some other place with an atmosphere and gravity similar to ours, you'll be good. Let's talk warm-ups very quickly, just because people ask me about it all the time. Here's how I think about warm-ups for any program from a minimalist perspective. One, have a general warm-up and a specific warm-up. Here's what I mean by that. A general warm-up should be something like this. Jump rope, hang, go for a jog, do some crawling, do some marching, just get the juices flowing. For this program, since you have rings, I'll recommend what Dan John does. Take the time to just hang from the rings, just do sets of hangs, really work some magic for the shoulders, gets the grip going. Then maybe do some light Turkish get-ups, some light original strength work. So if you guys aren't familiar with Tim Anderson and his original strength work, check out what he has. He's got tons of videos on his YouTube channel. Just do that sort of thing. Lots of crawling, rocking, head nods, rolling, just the general global neurodevelopmental patterns, warm-ups. I think 5 to 10 minutes of that stuff paired with hanging it's just gonna turn all the things on you want on. And then, specific warm-ups don't hurt either. So just spend a couple minutes just testing whatever movements are on the menu that day. If you've got pressing coming up, do some light presses. Just make sure the groove feels good. That nothing is there's no like major red flags that you should address. If something pops up, doesn't feel right, then give it some extra attention and some special love. So general warm-up, then a few light sets of whatever is on the menu that day to prepare the movement and run a quick diagnostic. Then get at it. I'm not a guy who likes to spend an hour warming up and 5 minutes on the actual workout. You should have warm-ups. They're important, but they should be general and then specific. And the goal should be to get to your training session as quickly as possible. I hope that makes sense. That's my philosophy on warm-ups. All right, day one. Here's by the way, guys, you don't have to do it this way. I'm just giving you an idea of a way you could put this stuff together. And I think develop a lot of general physical preparedness from just this equipment. Okay. And yes, I see more questions coming in. We will take those towards the end. So if you have a question at any point, drop it in the comments. I will answer it afterwards. Okay. So day one, let me talk through this. We'll start with a single arm pressing ladder. If you got a kettlebell, you're going to benefit from pressing. And one of the best ways to build strength with pressing is through ladders. So a ladder is where you move up and maybe down different rungs. So you'll start with one press on the right, one press on the left. And then I would recommend going up to 5 reps and back down. And for that, and I'm going to kind of assume that maybe you're just working with one kettlebell here, like kind of the standard weight, maybe a 24 kilogram or around that for most men, a 16 kilogram or around that for most women. So a 1 to 5, good, strict, focused pressing ladder. You're going to get a lot of mileage of that in terms of upper body, well, really full body strength. It's a grinding movement, but the abs are engaged, the glutes are engaged. You're going to work the upper pecs, the shoulders. You'll even work the lats and the press. So just good old fashioned 1-5-1 military press ladder. Rest as much as you need, but as little as you need between sets to feel like you can do the next set well again. So that's going to be kind of your focused, just grinding strength work. Then from there, we'll bring in the rings. And what I recommend here is an accumulation set. An accumulation set is a really good training strategy where you just put a certain amount of time on the clock. And for this, I would say anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes. You could even do less. You could do 10 minutes if you want, but just say 20 to 30 minutes for the sake of simplicity. And then you're going to alternate some push and pull variation on the rings. And I think the kind of killer app for the rings would be dips, ring dips, and chin-ups. Now, for some people, that might be a little, maybe you're not there yet. You've never done dips, or maybe you can't get your first pull-up yet. That's fine. You can do push-ups and rows. Or you could do some combination of those options. You could do dips and rows, or you could do push-ups and chin-ups. I think the standard you should eventually reach towards would be dips and chin-ups if you want to get the kind of full benefit of training on the rings. I think those are going to be the biggest bang for buck, but certainly nothing wrong with push-up variations and rows on the rings. And the nice thing about the rings is you can manipulate the angles to make the push-ups or the rows more or less difficult depending on your experience level and current ability. So again, a really useful tool. Now, when it comes to accumulation sets, here's how I like to do it. If I'm doing dips and push-ups or chin-ups, I usually like to keep my reps anywhere between 5 to like 10, maybe 12. I don't go much higher than that, but really controlled. And I focus on tempo and aesthetic quality. How smooth can I make the movement, right? I'm not a gymnast, but I do like to pretend to be one when I'm on the rings. So that means consistent control through the entire range of motion. There's usually, maybe around a 2-second tempo, both on the concentric and eccentric portions of the movement on the way up and the way down. So I'm trying to just make it look as pretty as possible and demonstrate as much control as possible through a nice, full, deep range of motion, whether I'm doing dips or pull-ups. And as soon as I start to notice some technical failure, meaning I notice some, I notice some qualitative aspect start to decrease. I start moving a lot slower, or my elbows start flaring out, or I start kind of compensating or leaning or swaying on the pull-ups or chin-ups. That's when the set is done. I never go to absolute failure, but I do look for markers of technical failure or performance decrease, and that's when I'm done with the set. So I'll do a set of dips, again, maybe between 5 to 10. Okay, feels good. Definitely push to a point of challenge, but not absolute failure. Then, I superset that. Set of chin-ups, same thing, rest. And then just alternate between those two for 20 to 30 minutes. Just treat this as practice. You're just getting as many high quality sets and reps as possible in the allotted time. If this makes sense, give me a grunt of acknowledgement in the comments. I like to know that I'm not just saying things that make sense only to me. Okay, so that's what an accumulation set is. And then the idea, over time it's kind of a you versus you thing. So every time you kind of come back to this routine, can you improve something about it? Can you do another set, or can you add another rep or two, or can you make your reps even prettier? So you should always kind of think of like, how could I PR at this? And a PR doesn't always mean more sets or reps. Even if you do the same number of sets and reps with more confidence and control, to me, that is a very worthwhile achievement. And it's something that you should consider. Okay. All right. From there, you will finish day one. I think a good finisher there would be 150 single arm swings as quickly as possible. But here's the thing. Every time you put the kettlebell down, do a set on the ab wheel. So how many sets of ab wheel you do on day one will depend on how many sets it takes you to get 150 single arm swings. So say you do a set of 10 on the right, set of 10 on the left, put it down. Okay, set of ab wheel. How many ab wheels should you do? Not to failure. I think honestly, even just 5 reps every time on day one would be fine. 3 to 5 reps. Just focus on good quality control. And then if you get completely smoked on the ab wheel where your reps just turn to junk, stop doing the ab wheel and just finish the swing. Keep the ab wheel in only insofar as you feel confident with the technique. Okay. You can burn out the ab wheel very quickly, especially if you're not used to doing ab wheel. It will tear you up. If you don't already have the sort of experience with it. So less is more here, especially starting out. Okay, good. That's day one. So day one is single arm press ladder, accumulation set of dips and pull-ups, or some type of push-pull in the rings, finishing with 150 single arm swings intermixed with ab wheel. Day two is going to be very minimalist, and we're going to work in some sprinting combinations. Here's one of my favorite combos. I mentioned this the other day in the Q&A session, but I wanted to put it in this sketch of this program here because I think it's such a good full body conditioning routine. And it's this. You're going to do push-ups, and it features what Dan John calls level changes. So sprints are intense enough, but once you put level changes into stuff, boy, your heart's going to want to jump out of your chest. It's going to be awesome. Trust me. All right, so you'll start with push-ups, 10 reps or fewer. 10 reps or fewer. Immediately get up, sprint. How long should you sprint for? Not very long, because it's a sprint. So as soon as you're not sprinting anymore, you're done. Generally, I go for distance. So I have a hill in my neighborhood. If you can sprint up the hill, all the better. It's usually a 10-second effort, if that, to get up the hill. So yeah, sprint until you're not sprinting anymore, right? All out, boom. And then once you notice, okay, I've lost power and force here, you're done. Again, 10 to 15 seconds, sort of max for this. Then once you're done with the sprint, goblet squats. Pick the kettlebell back up and fewer than 10 reps. So fewer than 10 push-ups, sprint, fewer than 10 goblet squats, walk back to where you started. That's your recovery period. Do up to, but no more than 6 rounds of that. And you're going to have an incredible full body conditioning and power session just from that. And then if you want to add a little extra to day 2, I put together this little complex for you, which I think is a really good one. It's 15 two-hand swings, 5 single arm push presses, each arm, 5 single arm lunges, each leg, and then 3 push-ups just for good measure. And then just put that on repeat for 10 to 15 minutes. So day 2 is definitely heavier on the metabolic conditioning. Day 1 had more of kind of a strength and hypertrophy focus. Day 2 is going to be more complexy. You're gonna sweat a lot more on day 2, most likely. Okay. Day 3 is just really kind of classic kettlebell work. We're going to do mostly all accumulation sets. The first one will be just Turkish get up practice. This is where we have 10 to 15 minutes on the clock, and we just work our Turkish get ups. You can do this any way you want, and it's okay to vary it. You can just do straight sets, 1 rep on the 1 rep right, 1 rep left, rest, and then just, get as many sets in as you can in 10 to 15 minutes. You could ladder. You could try and ladder up on the right as far as you can go until technical failure, and then switch and ladder on the left as far as you can go until technical failure. And then every week you can try and beat that. That's also a great option. So give you some guys some ideas to play around with. After Turkish get-ups, then just practice swings. Again, I put 2-hand swings here, but you could vary this up per week. You could do it 2-hand swings 1 week, single arm swings another week, alternating swings, start-stop swings. The idea is just 10 to 15 minutes on the clock. See how many quality swings you can get in that time. When it comes to sets of swings, I like to go for as many reps as you can or fewer until you notice a decrease in power. So every swing is about maximum force production, slamming your hips into the air, which sounds kind of awkward, but that's what a swing is about. That aggressive hip thrust. And as soon as you notice that you're losing snap, you're losing explosiveness, that's when you rest. That's when the set's done. Generally, if you're doing swings good and hard, probably around 10 to 15 reps is kind of the upper threshold there. And then let's finish with 5 minutes of ab wheel. How many quality sets can you get in 5 minutes? All right, last thing, and then I'll take your questions on this. Like I said, this was minimalist, but hopefully it gives you something you can take and use right away. What else should you be doing? 3 things. A daily brisk walk. Get out, especially now here in Wisconsin. The weather's getting nicer. Get some sunshine. Try and hit a daily brisk walk. This is something Dan and I talk about a lot. If you could just immediately follow up any one of these sessions with a 30 to 60-minute brisk walk or ruck or hike or something like that, that's phenomenal. But do try and do some type of extended low-level aerobic activity every single day. So good for your mood, so good for weight loss, so good for mental health. It is the secret sauce. Or the icing on the cake, if you will, but it's a very important icing. We don't want the cake is fine, but we definitely want the icing. All right. Get good quality sleep. That's important, but it bears repeating, and avoid poofs. I admitted that by general weakness when it comes to food is anything that answers to the description of cheesy and poofy. So Pat Flynn needs to keep things that are cheesy and poofy outside of the house. What I'm really saying here is nutrition matters. And it matters quite a bit for overall health and performance as well. So you want to pay attention to that. Of course, that's a separate episode. Okay, so there you have it, folks. I don't want to, prattle on too long, but that is that should get you started. And what I'll do is I will make this document and the program available over at the show notes. But for those of you who want the links in the meantime, I'm just going to drop the links for the gymnastic rings and ab wheel into the comments and all that. Yes, these are affiliate links. So if you use them, I would appreciate it, because if I get enough people to use my Amazon affiliate link, eventually I will get my 13-cent royalty check from Amazon, and then I will finally be able to afford organic blueberries. And that would mean a lot to me. All right, let's take some questions. So any questions you guys have on this, let's rock and roll with it. Let me scroll up. All right, Raju says, does high volume snatching and swings help in the deadlift for the sake of a hinge pattern? Okay, so not necessarily related to this program, but actually it might be in another way. The answer is yes, sometimes, but not always as much as people think, and it depends. And I realize that's a wildly unhelpful answer, but let me explain what I mean. If somebody is already doing with a barbell, lower intensity, higher rep, and or explosive hinging pattern, we can expect that the kettlebell swing will do less for them because there's less gaps to fill. However, what we often find is if people are just kind of doing the really heavy grindy stuff, the really heavy grindy lifts with the barbell, the kettlebell swing can fill a lot of gaps and it can carry over. And the higher volume swings and snatches can help improve their deadlift there because they're kind of working a different spectrum of the force velocity curve. So if somebody's already working that spectrum with a barbell, we will expect less from the swings and snatches to fill gaps there. It still might help a little bit, but a lot of people aren't training that kind of explosive higher rep hinging pattern with a barbell. So in that sense, the swings and snatches can and often do help. And I think they're just worth doing in their own right. So the answer is yes, sometimes, and it depends. I hope that is helpful for you. Good, sir. I don't, however, think that it is as like, sometimes people make it seem like it's magic. Like, oh, you're stuck on the deadlift? Do kettlebell swings and you'll improve your deadlift by 25% overnight. I'm very skeptical of that. Okay. Next question comes from our gentle listener, Dwight Johnson. He says, you may have already answered this question, but is there one exercise with the kettlebells that targets your midsection more than any other? Yeah, that's a good question. One, I didn't mention it here, but certainly you could incorporate this into the program, is I think a really good direct core exercise is the reverse crunch. And the reverse crunch can be used with a kettlebell as an anchor. So you don't have to use a kettlebell for it, but the kettlebell is kind of useful for this. And the kettlebell is anchored over your head. You're lying on your back, and you grab onto the kettlebell to kind of weigh you down and pin you to the ground. And then you bring your knees up to your forehead and you slowly lower them down. It's the reverse crunch because you're crunching from your bottom half up. If you look up my friend Jordan Syatt, if you type in Jordan Syatt reverse crunch, he has a tutorial for this exercise on his YouTube channel with the kettlebell. So that's one. Now that's not like a kettlebell exercise because you could do it with other things, but the kettlebell kind of works well for this. Other kettlebell exercises that really target your midsection are pressing works because there's a lot of midsection stability. I really like heavy rack holds. 2 heavy kettlebells, put them in the rack, squeeze the glutes, brace the abs, learn to breathe behind the shield. That is a really, really useful core exercise. Another one that's kind of useful in a different way would be just kind of single arm bottoms up carry. A lot of unexpected core activation going on with that. So the kettlebell works the core in similar ways that a lot of the big kind of fundamental free weight lifts work the core. Like they just naturally demand a lot from the core in terms of the intra-abdominal pressure and stabilization. So you're always getting that activation. But that's why I like having the ab wheel in there or something like the reverse crunch, because it gives us a little bit more targeted direct core work, especially when it comes to other aspects of the core, such as flexion, extension, anti-rotation, and stuff like that. So that's how I would begin to answer that. I hope that speaks to your question, good sir. Anthony says, how much time would I dedicate to the warm-up? 10 to 15 minutes. I think if you're trying to do the general and specific warm up, like 10 to 15 minutes max, hanging, crawling, rocking, some light Turkish get ups, maybe make a little circuit out of that. You're going to get the shoulders going, the hips, the knees, the ankles, all that. You'll get the heart rate. You do want to get the heart rate up, right? We do want to just kind of like just get the blood flowing. That is important. Then a few light sets of whatever is on the menu that day. For most people, unless you've just got other issues you need to spend extra time on, I think about 10 to 15 minutes will be more than adequate. Deva said, would you share this schedule in the description? Thanks. Yeah, so I will just embed this after this is done, after the live stream is done. I'll put it on the podcast and I will create a full show notes over at chroniclesofstrength.com where I have all the episodes and all the show notes, and I'll just put the whole thing right there for you guys. So once we're done with this stream, that'll be up within about an hour, but I'll come back and then I'll link it in the description so you guys have it handy for your convenience. The Thomas says, speaking of less equipment, what do you think about doing double kettlebell exercises with 2 kettlebells of different weight instead of buying the same kettlebells? Yeah, the asymmetrical loading is awesome. I'm a huge fan of this. And I have to admit, I don't even do it as much as I think that I should be doing it. So there is just kind of this odd thing. And we all just kind of assume this, right? That if I'm going to use 2 weights, they kind of have to be the same size. Well, why is that, right? Where is that assumption coming from? It's just sort of this thing that we all do. But like, life rarely ever hands us objects that are just like perfectly situated, that they exert the same amount of resistance to both sides of our body simultaneously. That's just not how life works. So I think there's just a lot of just kind of real world practical benefit to dealing with unwieldy, cumbersome, objects. And one way you can kind of mimic that is with kettlebells with 2 different size weights. And it's actually fun to do like really offset loading. So like go like a very heavy weight or a pretty heavy weight, like say like a 32 kilogram in your right and like a 12 kilogram in your left, and then do like sets of presses there and sets of squats. And you'll notice there's a unique challenge to that. And depending on the exercises you do, you'll get unique benefits from the uneven load that you won't get from the even load, like anti-rotational benefits and stuff like that. It can also make for good progressions, right? So if you're kind of like trying to move up, say from like 224 to 232 kilogram, it is a good halfway step to kind of start working with 124 and 128, for example. That is, and start doing seesaw presses and double presses. That is a very sensible progression. And then you can get to 228s, and then you can go 128, 132, and then 232. So we're kind of moving stepwise. And I think there's a lot of value in that. So I am a fan of that, Thomas. I greatly approve. And I think it doesn't just have to be small differences. I think even the big differences can make for fun and interesting training challenges and training variations as well. So I'm glad you brought that up. It's a really good question. All right, we'll take a few more here. Austin says, as someone who has never used kettlebells before, what should one look for when figuring out starting weight when buying their first kettlebell or set of kettlebells? So Austin, very common and good question. I appreciate it. And I will say this, it depends, because it depends. Like, have you been resistance training for a while? Do you have general weightlifting experience? Are you kind of like generally fit? Or are you kind of, or will the kettlebells be your first foray into resistance training ever, or maybe in a very long time? But yeah, I would say somewhere for most men of an average size, somewhere between 12 to 16 kilogram is going to be a decent starting weight, because it's going to be heavy enough that it's going to, still offer an adequate challenge and learning experience for the lower body moves and the explosive moves. If you go too light, then you can get away with cheating a lot of the lower body exercises. Like, you can get away with like cheating swings by turning them into delt raises and stuff like that. But if you go too heavy, then you won't be able to do the upper body stuff. Like, you might be able to do some of the lower body stuff and learn that, but then, and that's good for swings. But then you'll kind of be stuck on the presses and stuff like that. So most men starting out, I think between 12 to 16 kilogram is a decent target. I do recommend, if possible, just to get a set starting out. So for men, something like a 16 kilogram, a 24 kilogram, and a 32 kilogram. And that's a set you can kind of start with and work and progress through. That it's going to last you, honestly, your entire life, right? So like starting out, the 32 kilogram, you might only be doing like swings and deadlifts and maybe some squats with it. But as you get stronger and over the years, eventually you'll do presses with it and Turkish get up. So you won't necessarily ever outgrow that set. But you'll have the 16 kilogram to start with some of the upper body stuff. And but then you'll still have the heavier loads to challenge you more for the lower body stuff, because there's always going to be disparities, right? That's kind of the difficulty with this question, is that, presumably and preferably we should be able to deadlift and squat more than we can press overhead, right? So what might be a decent overhead pressing challenge might not be a great challenge for some of the lower body stuff. So there's always compromise here. But But to answer it generally, just starting out as a learning experience and what will be able to give you a reasonable and worthwhile challenge, yeah, I'd say between 12 to 16 kilogram is going to be a good target for you there. But if you can get the set, get the set. And let me give one more plug to Inverted Gear. Go check those guys out and use that discount code if you're going to order, because they are good kettlebells, just the right dimensions. They feel great. They get the Pat Flynn seal of approval there. Okay, doke. Lucas says, hey, what's your stance on mouth guards during the grinding lifts? I have found some positive benefits in terms of maintaining tension throughout the entire spine. My wife thinks it's all in my head, pun intended. That is very funny. That is very funny. Yeah, how do I feel about this? I'm not a huge fan of this because I think it's kind of training you to do something that might not be ideal if you don't have a mouth guard in, which is like really grind your teeth and be tense in your face. I think what we want with tension is to learn to be tense where we need to be and not to be tense where we don't need to be. This may change, of course, if you're interested in becoming, kind of a specialized power lifter, and there's often unique tension techniques that they use. But I think for general practitioners, we want to learn to be tight in the body, but relatively relaxed in the face. I don't think that you want to be like, take it from me. Orthodontia is expensive. I had braces my senior year of high school. Not the coolest year to have braces, and I don't want to get it again. And my dentist and orthodontist have said that I grind my teeth way too much. So it's something I've actually had to try to stop doing. And part of that comes from me bringing tension into my face from years of weightlifting that I've had to try and just consciously deprogram. So it makes sense to me that if you really bite down, that could kind of that could be a feed forward trick for being tenser elsewhere. But again, I think for most people, most of the time, I would say, no, let's just try and learn to be tense where we need to be and not tense where we don't want to be, which will take some slowing down and some, mind body awareness and some people telling you to stop making such a goofy face when you press. So good question. But then again, I've never tried it with a mouth guard. So I'm open to that experiment. I'm not going to do it, but if you want to let me know how it goes, that'd be sweet. Last one. Alan says, I spend part of my time at sea level and part at 12,000 feet. How do I acclimate to this routine? So the one that I gave you, you're just going to want to reduce the probably, especially on the conditioning days, the general volume or intensity. I don't know how well acclimated you are to the higher altitude training, but just expect that when you make that switch, your performance will probably not be as great. And so just adjust it accordingly. I don't know if that's helpful, but that would be, I think, the expectation. Don't expect that you will perform as well at those various altitudes because you almost certainly will not. And that's okay. So yeah, good question. Okay, folks. Thank you for the wonderful discussion this morning. I hope you found this helpful. I always enjoy chatting with you. Let me get this off the screen so you can see my face before we say goodbye. Do me a favor. If you like our podcast, if you like the Pat Flynn Show, if you're on iTunes or Stitcher, take the time to leave a review and rank the show. Those reviews, especially the positive, gushy, gooey reviews, really do help bring new people to the show. So if you think we're doing good work, help us out there. Like, comment, subscribe, all that stuff really helps on social media. And I will link the full show notes page in the description as soon as we have it uploaded later this morning, which will have the full protocol right there on over at chroniclesofstrength.com. So you can download it, screenshot it, print it off, put it on your refrigerator, whatever you want to do. So thanks again for tuning in, everybody. It has been an absolute joy, and we will catch you on the next episode. Farewell.